Hello, everybody. Welcome to the June episode of Real Estate Unlocked podcast. I'm Andy Camp. Can you believe it's June? Congratulations to everybody at Cutler Real Estate in Title I that completed the Everyday in May challenge. I know it was a busy May. We saw people committed, posting on socials. So congratulations, in spite of being busy, really taking the Everyday in May challenge and embracing it. I'm excited for our June episode because I have a very special guest today, Tricia Reed. Welcome.
Thank you.
Tricia has been with Cutler Real Estate for 22 years. She has done pretty much everything. She started out as a sales agent. Then she headed up our rental division coming out of the pandemic, moved into a management role, and is now the senior vice president of Northeast Ohio. And during all of that, she also became a certified coach with Mike Staver Coaching for both life and business coaching.
Yes.
So welcome today, Tricia.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Glad to have you here. So, for people that are not familiar with Mike Staver Coaching, give us a little bit of background about what differentiates his approach to coaching and why you feel like it's so effective.
Yeah, I think anybody who's not familiar with Mike Staver should get familiar with Mike Staver.
I agree.
But his program is different because you think about, there's a lot of different coaching styles. There's a problem-driven coaching, program-driven coaching. Ninja would be something like a program-driven. There can be skill-driven. Maybe that's somebody learning how to golf. But his is client-driven. It's client-centric. It's all centered around where the client needs to go and what the client wants, which is a little different than say Ninja, who says, follow your Ninja 9s. The system works the system. We love it. We love that. That does work. But what I don't hear Ninja talk about, and I think this is a good example of showing what Mike does, is it doesn't always say what happens when the client isn't, or when the agent isn't following the Ninja 9s.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when I don't? Mike's system is focused around the client asking questions, digging to what it is that has them blocked and unlocking that.
Yeah. So, the coaching approach often emphasizes that success starts from the inside out. So tell me a little bit more about that client-focused approach as opposed to a system-focused approach or a problem-focused approach.
Yeah, because I believe your thinking drives your behavior, and your behaviors are going to drive your results. So if we don't change our behaviors, our results never change. And I think if we believe that we are in a transaction-based business, which a lot of agents do, they're just turning and burning transactions. But if we believe we are in a value-based business and we're building relationships, then we are going to believe when we show up to that appointment that we're bringing value and we're really working to build relationships. And that's a very different mindset.
That is a different mindset. That's interesting because why do you think, particularly in real estate, most agents tend to be transactionally focused?
I mean, there's a lot of reasons for that, but I think they just like the volume, the numbers. Sometimes they don't have something like Ninja or a company like Cutler to teach them how to actually build relationships. And they really do think that it's, especially an agent who's buying leads, I just need to show up, I need to open the door, and I need to have you buy a house with me. But then I don't follow up with you, and then that's the big mistake.
It's funny you say that. So what keeps rolling around in my head when you talk about transactionally focused agents is that they tend to have their best first year over and over again. And they don't understand, it might be a financial need or whatever it is, in terms of being transactionally focused, but they don't understand how much more lucrative and how much more sustainable slowing down and focusing on the relationships. What kind of mindset do you have to be able to be successful, focusing on that relationship, because that is more of a long-term gain as opposed to that instant gratification.
Well, I think you need to be committed to building those relationships with your clients and really sustaining them. I mean, it's really going to just be being consistent in all the activities that we know we need to do to be successful in this business. That consistency is hard. So really just having that mindset of I'm committed to building relationships and bringing value to every transaction that I do versus I'm just going to get through this one and move on to the next one.
So there's often confusion between coaching, mentoring, consulting, and training. What is the difference and what makes coaching so powerful?
The difference would be mentoring is more, I mean, I was looking at this, it's probably more follow me. Consulting's more telling. Coaching is more performance based. Coaching is all about moving you from a state of intention to execution. So, narrowing the gap between intention and execution and understanding that staying in that gap is very costly and expensive. If I intend to go do business, but I don't do any prospecting to gain the business, I also didn't put a paycheck in my account. It's a very costly place to be.
So are most people existing in that gap between intention and execution?
I think they are, yeah. I mean, we intend to wake up and do all the things we know we need to do, but then the kid's sick or the dog runs away, the phone rings, I get distracted in some way, and then I don't do the activities I know I need to be doing. So I constantly am staying in intention and not moving forward to execution and actually doing the work.
So what's one simple thing if you find yourself stuck? Because obviously we all have the best of intentions, and the majority of people, particularly at Cutler Real Estate, they have the intention to do good. And most of us, do execute, on a consistent basis. But what would be one piece of advice that you would give from a coaching perspective on how you could get unstuck, in between intention and execution?
One way you could get unstuck is truly figuring out what it is that has you stuck. And I think a good example would be, people tend to come into a coaching session and they say, I didn't make calls because I really didn't want to bother people. I really don't want to bother people. It's not that they don't want to bother people. They're afraid of what happens when somebody actually picks up the phone. And although this never happens, I mean, I don't know. Have you ever seen it happen? You actually pick up the phone and call a past client and they're like, why are you calling me?
Right.
I don't think that happens.
No,
but
very
that's
rarely.
what we tell ourselves.
Right.
But if I did a coaching session with somebody and I said, let's talk about what has you blocked, I'm not going to go down the road of, I don't want to bother people. We'll start there. That's kind of a symptom of what the true issue is. The true issue is I'm afraid if when they pick up the phone, they're going to say they didn't want to talk to me, or no, I wouldn't give you a referral. Then maybe it's a fear of rejection. So we really have to dig into what that thing is that has them blocked. And once we're there, we can work with that.
Yeah, that's so funny. I think that fear of rejection is very real in most people. And it really has, you and I offline for years have talked about the why behind the why behind the why.
Yes, the thing behind the thing.
And it's like, okay, so that fear of rejection is compounded by our programming, our upbringing, all of these things. And we've created this false narrative in our head. And that's why mindset is so important, because I have never heard of one client that has said, I hate hearing from you. I can't believe you waited 8 years to call me. Don't ever call me again.
I haven't heard it either.
But I would say if that experience is true with somebody, just move on.
Yeah.
Maybe even write them a personal note and say, I apologize for bothering you. Good luck and God bless.
Right.
It's one of those things where it's like, it ain't that deep, right?
No, it's not.
So
it's probably not going to happen.
Right. So you go back and I love that idea that coaching, as opposed to mentorship where I'm just going to hold your hand and show you, or consulting, I'm going to tell you, coaching really gets down to the root base. So you really can dial in your mindset consistently, as opposed to kind of forcing you to overcome some things that maybe you just haven't even addressed or identified as obstacles or challenges.
And maybe it's a blind spot for you. So coaching also shines the light in all those dark places.
That's not always a fun thing.
No, those are usually the things we don't want to look at.
So, it occurs to me, in talking about moving from intention to execution, there's a really powerful, basic, but not often achieved concept in coaching of accountability. Why is accountability so powerful, and why do you think people are so resistant to being held accountable?
Because accountability makes you take responsibility for your actions, and people don't always love to do that. They don't want to own exactly where they are and then make the change to go where they need to go. So accountability is a tricky one because it really does make you responsible for all the things you do.
So what, obviously that sounds good. Accountability on the surface seems like it should be a simple process. It should be simple. Okay, I want to do this. I'm asking you, Tricia, to hold me accountable to do the things that I've said I wanted to do.
Yeah.
But then when it comes down to it, and I haven't moved from intention to execution, now I get super uncomfortable in that state of owning my results, good or challenged.
So then I cancel my coaching session because I don't want to tell them myself.
Right. Or I avoid, or I, so why is that? Why is that so difficult for people?
Um, People do have a lack of accountability, but I actually think it's more a lack of focus or a lack of discipline.
Okay.
When we lack focus, we really aren't putting our energy in the right places. We're probably not focusing on those activities that bring us the most return on our investment of time and energy. We're just doing things to be busy, to be busy. But if I showed up and I said to you in a coaching session, see, I'm accountable. I did all these things. I made a perfectly color coded time blocking schedule. I'm going to follow my perfect week, which I actually never followed. But look how long it took me to create this time blocking schedule. I look like I'm busy. But accountability truly would be, no, I didn't make the calls. No, I didn't follow the schedule. And let's work to what it is that's going to get me there.
So I think a lot of people have the misconception that being in an accountable coaching relationship, it's automatically punitive. It's a negative situation. Tell me a little bit more about that, because you're there as my coach. You're there as a resource for my success. It's a shared responsibility for success. So in that example you just described, okay, well, I had the best of intentions. I have an ideal week. I didn't make my calls. I got caught up in the immediate rather than the important. What's your approach to accountability, and how do you make that into a positive, or, is it possible to have a nurturing experience and also be held accountable?
Yeah, I don't want to be like your angry school teacher. I'm not here to reprimand you if you don't do the things. But I think we do want to dig into what it is that's keeping you from doing the activities. Is it a lack of boundaries? Because a lot of people tend to say, I didn't have time to do all those things. My day got away from me, or the phone rang. I had a little fear of missing out. If I didn't pick up the phone, would they move on to someone else? So really, coaching is just about digging into what it is that's getting in the way of you doing the activities, not necessarily reprimanding you because you didn't do them.
So you mentioned something that's interesting. So tell me a little bit more about what you mean by boundaries in a coaching relationship.
I don't know that it's necessarily between the coach and the client, but it is with the client and others in their life. I mean, a really big one you hear is in real estate, we're always busy, and we don't always get our work done between 8 and 5 because we don't exactly know where our day takes us.
Sure.
But then when we go home at night, our families might be upset with us because we're answering emails or answering phone calls. We're not spending quality time with them. There would be areas there where we could hold better boundaries so that we can be more present with our family versus just picking up the phone, because I'm afraid if I don't, the call is going to go on to someone else.
So would you say that the establishing effective boundaries in business is a combination of practicing and honing both mindset and skill set?
Yeah.
So what are some skills that you would recommend, or you would coach somebody towards to set up effective boundaries in their life and business?
They would be more habit change,
Okay.
Having a pretty strict schedule that you adhere to every day. Like maybe you wake up in the morning, and if we want to follow Ninja, we wake up and we have some quiet time with gratitudes and inspirations, and then maybe we sit and we write our notes. But if we make that a habit, we just do that every day like we brush our teeth. It just becomes a habit. And then we don't maybe answer our emails before 9 a.m. so that we do have some time to get our mind straight in the morning. And then we move on to our day. And then we know at 5 or 6, whatever time dinner time is, we're going to sit with our family and we're going to have dinner. We schedule that just like it's any other appointment. But if we have a pretty consistent day that we follow, and that's more like habit change, I think we're going to be a lot more successful than just letting the business run us.
All right, so I'm going to play devil's advocate here,
Okay.
because you're talking about habits, you're talking about consistency, you're talking about discipline.
Mm-hmm.
That all sounds super boring. Like
it is super boring.
so tell me about that. And I've said I want your business to be boring and your life to be exciting. But
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about how coaching can create a boring business that gives you the life that you're looking for.
I mean, I think it's just that if you're focused on those activities, we do an exercise with the Staver group. It's called your high gain activity. What is the thing that if you did it the most would bring you the most production and profit to your business? And do those things. Do that thing, do those things. Maybe it's real estate reviews. Why am I going to sit in an open house every Sunday for 2 hours would you say that for a year that's 104 hours? Why am I going to spend 104 hours at open house? Not that there's anything wrong with open houses, but if that's not bringing me any return on my business, I want those hours back.
Sure.
But if I can pretty predictably say, if I do these activities, I'm going to get a return on my investment, that's just working smarter, not harder.
So when you say I want to get those hours back, you know, is our agents' sense of what their self-worth and their time, do they have a good sense of what their time is
I
worth?
don't think so. I mean, we did this exercise as a company. Think about how many hours you take, say, especially with a buyer. You know, if you spend X amount of hours with a buyer, then you divide that by the commission that you received. Sometimes it's as little as $20 an hour. Do we want to work for $20 an hour? Maybe, but
So
I think we can do better.
So measuring efficiencies and looking at, once again, that consistency, do you think that, well, let me ask you this. You asked the question, well, do we want to work for $20 an hour? What kind of programming do you think creates obstacles for people when they look at money, they look at wealth generation? Do you think that is a huge obstacle for most people to overcome?
I do think that's a huge obstacle because they may not feel like they deserve success. I mean, and that would be something to look at in coaching. I mean, coaching isn't counseling, it isn't therapy, but it is really taking a look at some of those things that have you blocked. And if I don't have a good relationship with money, that's going to show up in my business. That's going to show up in my personal life. I mean, the way we do one thing tends to be how we do all things. So, you know, really taking a look at, you know, are you really ready to be successful?
So I love that, what you just said. The way we do one thing it tends to be the way we do everything. And you mentioned, you know, a common conflict of, okay, well, you know, there's conflict at home. You know, obviously our mission is to help you thrive in life and business.
Right.
And if there is conflict in life, it doesn't matter, you know, how much business you do, it's always going to be a drag. So, you know, what are some of the things, or what have you seen from a coaching perspective that spills over because of good habits and good practices in business, you know, that spills over into life?
Well, I mean, you just have a more harmonious home life, and a lot of you know, a lot of times I can.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? I mean, you know, one of the biggest things that we do here is in real estate, because people call us at all times of the day and night, and we don't tend to hold good boundaries there. We really do answer the phone. We interrupt dinners. We get up, we walk away from the table, and then our loved ones are usually like, "You're never here, and you're not really paying attention to me." That really affects our personal life. So we really do want to think life first and then business second. But we also do an exercise that's called like a result strategy action exercise. And I really think it helps professionals to know kind of their why. What is the result I'm truly looking for in this business? Is it, you know, people say, well, I want to increase my average sale price so that I can work smarter, not harder. That'd be a good one. But that's really a strategy. That's a strategy to get you to what result? Well, so I can be more present with my family.
Okay.
Great. So now we know we want to be more present with our family. So what are those strategies that we can come up with that are going to support that? And that's kind of the why. I'm doing this because I want to provide for my family. I want to be present when I'm with them. I want to go on vacation. I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but if I know my why, that also helps anchor in why I do this crazy business that we all do every single day. And it helps us hold those boundaries a little better because we will value our time at home because we know we're working hard everywhere else and we know what we're working towards.
So when somebody's considering hiring a coach, what kind of mindset shifts do they have to put themselves in the best position possible to be successful with their coaching relationship?
It really just is that commitment to growth and learning and the willingness to just truly own where you are and what's working and what's not, and abandon the things that are not working for us and really embrace those that are.
So are there candidates that are not good candidates for coaching? Are there agents that are not good candidates for coaching?
We do talk about the uncoachable in the Staver coaching certification. We talk about it's one of my favorite things that we talk about. And someone who isn't coachable is probably somebody who's very defensive to any kind of suggestion. You're not coachable if you're showing up late, if you're not taking it serious, you're not honoring the commitments that we agree to. Coaching is the opposite of that. It's somebody that's willing to embrace it and really be a part of it and really wants to move forward. Because we don't just wake up one day and typically say, I want to call a coach. We don't do that. We wake up and we say, I'm exhausted. I'm tired of doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. I'm overwhelmed and I need to move myself out of this place. And so then I'm going to hire a coach to do that.
So really, so how often in your experience are people proactively, in a growth mode, growth mindset, seeking a coach versus reactively, I'm burnout, I can't do this anymore, I need help? Is what's the typical profile of a candidate that you work with from a coaching perspective?
I think the typical profile is more reactive than proactive. There are those that are out there that are like, I want to coach, I want to stay top of my game, I want to sustain this specific coaching level, because coaching isn't performance, and it isn't punishment rather, and it isn't for those that are failing. It really is for those that want to perform and do better, or sustain a specific level, because it's hard to sustain high levels of performance. But the stats, I don't know what they are. I tend to see people that come to me more because there was some event or circumstance that led them to me.
So, in that process, then the Staver Group talks a lot about particularly intentionality.
Mm-hmm.
How do you you mentioned earlier that this is not therapy. Coaching is not therapy.
It's not.
But at the same time, to open up and kind of share your relationship with money, or what are some of the things that are, causing you to seek a coach, maybe conflict at home, whatever, that concept of intentionality, that's going to require a little bit of trust
and vulnerability. Mm-hmm. And you
S-
build that rapport over time. That doesn't happen instantly.
All right. So tell me about that. So for somebody that maybe burn out or has the desire to grow, but maybe they've had, the same year for 2 or 3 years. And obviously the market that we've been in has been challenging, whether you're brand new to the business or whether you've been in the business like we have for over 20 years, there's been some unique challenges over the last few years. So how do you start building trust and opening the door to vulnerability without it becoming a therapy session?
Yeah.
And really help people kind of get refocused on what they want to achieve in this business.
It really is remembering that this coaching is performance based, but when somebody is going through something personal, it will affect them professionally.
Sure.
I mean, I can tell you about an experience I had. I started coaching with Mike because I had a very significant loss when my mom passed away. And I was sitting for months in the same place. I was showing up. I wasn't really moving forward in my business. And it's not because you or Cutler or anybody came to me and said, Tricia, you better get your stuff together. I just didn't want to stay there. No, I mean, Cutler was nothing but supportive, believe me. But Mike was offering at the time like a free 30 minutes. And so I took him up on that free 30 minutes and I said, hey, this is where I am. I'm stuck and I'm not moving forward professionally. And I haven't for months. I'm showing up and that's about all I'm doing, which was about all I could do at the time. And, so after a lot of conversation and asking questions and really telling him, what I went through after my mom passed away, he said, well, let's think about one thing you can do. What's one thing you do that you feel like you do well? And at the time I felt like it was writing notes. And he said, okay, can you commit to writing one note every day for the next 5 days? And I said, I can commit to that. It was just a very small tweak, but it helped me take one step forward. And that's what a coach can do. So it wasn't therapy. It wasn't counseling. He didn't talk me through the 5 stages of grief or any of that. He said, let's think about one thing we can do to start moving you forward. And that was all I needed to just start taking the next step and the next step.
So a good coach really is going to come down at whatever level you gain and understand. So there is a little bit of consulting that comes with it too. Sure. I mean, getting, asking questions and being in a, we talk a lot about being in a state of curiosity.
Always.
So getting down to that one thing, it's almost like you find that anchor and then you build off of that habit or that process and then build from there.
Yes.
So it's not a comprehensive, hey, I'm going to come in and tell you all the things you're doing wrong and I'm going to, I'm going to, make you feel like you're a failure. It's really much more on the client's level in terms of really achieving what they really want. And sometimes they don't know what they want to achieve.
And sometimes they don't know, but it is focused on them and where they want to go. And we always take what the client gives us and then we work from there. So it really is more of a client driven agenda. And then we do have tools to help work you through obstacles, but it really is driven by the client. And that's what makes his coaching system just a little bit different.
So let's shift gears just a little bit, because I hear this a lot. And there's a lot of really bad coaches in the business.
There's a lot of people that hang a shingle and say, I'm a
they
coach.
do. You know, social media, unfortunately, has allowed a lot of people to say they're a lot of things, and coaching usually pops up. And
we just heard about one.
Yeah.
This 2 hours, $59 or something, and you can be a certified coach.
Yeah.
That's not how that works. 5 years later, I'm still learning.
So what would you say to agents that feel like they're in that category of being reactive? They know that they need some help. You know, they've achieved a certain level of success, but they can't seem to push past or achieve that next level or what they want, whether it's balance at home, whether it's building wealth, whatever it is. For people that are skeptical and investing in coaches, like what would you say to them, and what's some advice to evaluate what you feel like is legitimate versus just kind of the social media fly-by-night craze?
Yeah, I don't know about the social media stuff, but I would ask, what is it costing them not to have a coach?
Okay.
I mean, what is it costing you not to invest in yourself? And really, those that coach and coach regularly, I mean, I still coach with Mike to this day, all these years later, once a month, and it's not cheap, but it's an investment, not a cost to me. I'm investing in me and in my career and my future. I'm not looking at it as a cost. And so you'll see some of your top producers and those that really value coaching really looking at it as an investment. And what we found is that whatever amount of money you invest in coaching, you will get back 7 times that in performance, in productivity, in goal achievement. I mean, that's a pretty astounding statistic that you get that back 7 times.
So tell me how you measure that.
Well, you can measure that personally,
Okay.
because if we think about, this is where I am, this is where I want to be, this is the path I'm going to go to get there. And then we also need to put some parameters on it, like how will you know when you're there?
Okay.
And that goal is different for everybody, because some people might say, I need a transaction a week. Some people might say, I'm happy with 1 a month. So that's really, again, kind of driven by the client and what the client finds to be successful and how they would measure it.
So is it always measured by transaction or performance, or is it managed by lifestyle sometimes too?
It can be lifestyle too, and it can be both. A lot of people come to a coach because it is more performance, because I haven't had a sale in 6 months and I'm about to go get a full-time job. And rather than get a full-time job, I want to invest in coaching. I want to really be all in real estate.
That's interesting. You know, so if I came to you and I said, okay, well, you know, I have my production's good, but I'm burnt out and I'd like to take a 2-week vacation with my family. I haven't had a vacation in 5 years. What would be that kind of first step discovery process of how you would help me, and how would you coach me to measure that 7x growth performance if it's lifestyle as opposed to transaction?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just do a little history with you first. Like, tell me a little bit about where you've been.
Okay.
You know, and then be really honest with me about where you are right now and what's working, what's not working. I mean, Ninja even came out this week in their video and said there's so many agents doing things that just aren't working for them, but we still do them.
Yes.
So really being clear on what it is that's working and what's not working. And then let's talk about where we want to go. Let's put that path together, and then let's put a little accountability to it, and let's move you in that direction. Because, you know, I might not have the same goal as you, but I want to clear any obstacles that are getting in your way.
Well, you know that I talk about clarity a lot, and
really important.
And there is so much noise in our industry right now. I was at the 1,000-watt marketing conference last week in Denver, you know, and they were talking about how in real estate, you know, Gary Vee said that 50% of a real estate agent's time should be spent developing content.
Oh,
And
wow.
and they just debunked it, saying, look, that's not, you know, most of the time you're doing all these things and you're marketing to all the wrong people, because, you know, is this connecting you to your community? Is this connecting to your clients? So, you know, it's interesting to think about coaching as an opportunity to get clarity. And for the first time in maybe a lot of agents' careers, that they've never had that level of clarity. You know, tell me a little bit more about, getting that history. Where are you coming from? How do you kind of drill down and get that basic clarity for somebody you're working with?
It's asking a lot of questions.
Okay.
I mean, and really just using the past as a reference of where you've been. We don't really want to spend a lot of time in the past. We really want to stay grounded in the present and then looking towards the future. And that's really just a very consistent message. Like, let's just be really clear about where we are and be really clear about where we want to go. And then the rest of it tends to fall in place.
So in your experience in working with people from a coaching perspective, what are some of the aha moments that people have had, in when, getting unstuck or having clarity of what they really want out of their business? Like, what are some things that stand out in your experience being a coach?
It really is when you get to that thing behind the thing, when they're telling themselves, I don't want to bother people, so that's why I'm not making my calls. But really uncovering what it is that's keeping them from making the calls, that's an aha. What it is that's keeping somebody from honoring their schedule and going through their day, that they're focusing more on a lack of boundaries or a lack of focus, that's the aha.
So are call avoidance techniques the biggest single thing in coaching? Are they?
Yeah, well, think about it. I mean, even we do it as leadership. We don't make the calls that we know we're supposed to make. We don't, agents aren't calling their databases on a regular basis, even though we preach it and say it all the time. But I think that's just a good example that everybody can resonate with.
Yes. Yeah. We call it CAT, call avoidance techniques.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, for our agents listening today, what is obviously, if you're going to make an investment, you want to know what that ROI, you talked about 7x growth, what's if someone started coaching with you, say July 1st, what would be I'm not going to say typical because everybody's individual. What can they expect out of that initial coaching phase of discovery and then implementation? What's the thing that they can expect in that, like, say, first 6 months?
Yeah, we always first have a call just to make sure that we're a good fit. And typically you're a fit. We just want to make sure that they understand how I operate as a coach. And then we want to build a little rapport. And then I usually ask them some questions about what led them to coaching. Have they ever coached before? What was their experience? So we have a fit call. Then we have our first call. And in our first call, I really do talk a lot about what our time looks like, how I would like them to keep this appointment as important as any other appointment on their calendar, that I'm going to take it that seriously. I let them know that, I'm going to look to them to bring the agenda. But what I typically do, especially like within an organization, is our first session might be all of that. Tell me a little bit about where you've been, where you are, really just building some rapport and getting to know them. The second session is usually built around their high gain activity or activities. Like, what are those things? And then the next time we'll review that. The next one after that would be a lot about what is that result we're really trying to get. And then I'm going to look to you to bring an agenda. So we usually have our first 4 to 6 sessions pretty set.
Okay.
And by that point, the client is really just cooking with oil. And they're like, all right, this is what we need to talk about today.
Okay, good. So it really is more self-directed rather than, so it sounds like truly, Staver Group's approach to coaching and what you live and embody is really as individual as the coaching client.
Yes.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all national coach that I'm going to
say these things, do this thing.
Square peg, round hole. So we talked about call avoidance techniques.
Yeah. And
we talked in your approach is much more of a holistic, tailored approach, the why behind the why, getting down intentionality. So how do you incorporate, so if you identify a client that needs to build skill set, how do you incorporate skill set into that coaching relationship if it's client driven in terms of, where you're going?
There's still some teaching and training and telling that happens in coaching.
Okay.
So think of, we're a ninja company.
Yeah.
If I were coaching with somebody and they said, I'm not doing the things, so let's start talking about some activities. They would be based around ninja. That we can start implementing into your business. And let's talk about the amount of time that you're willing to do them and what we can commit to. So there is some telling and teaching and training that happens in coaching. We just don't want it to only be that.
So what is one of your greatest success stories as a coach?
Well, I think I'm a success story.
I would agree.
But, I was thinking about this because we see companies that invest in coaching and, either they have a coach for the company, they have agents that just hire coaches. We actually have agents that hire coaches on a pretty regular basis. And the statistics show us that those agents have as much as a 70% increase in volume and as much as a 30% increase in units. I mean, that in transactions, that's huge.
That's huge.
Yeah. And you also hear the stories like we were talking about the agent that's at the crossroads. This happens actually more than we think. And they're about to go get a job because, I need to buy milk for my family. I need to pay some bills. My car's about to get repossessed. I haven't sold a house in 6 months. We see that. And rather than go and getting the job, they invest in coaching and they go from making very small amounts of money to over six figures. For me, it was, starting out as a sales manager and having you send me to Maestro Leadership and meeting Mike and then really investing in myself to now be where I am with the company. I mean, there's exponential success stories when it comes to coaching.
So, thank you for the conversation.
Thank you.
This is something that I wanted to do for a long time, and I'm glad
happy to
that the rest of the company gets to learn how broad your skill set is,
All the things I do behind
and
the
all the
curtain.
things you do behind the curtain. As we wrap up today, what's for everybody on the podcast, everybody that's listening to our episode, what's that one piece of advice if they're considering starting a coaching relationship, and what would you say to them about getting started?
I think the best advice I could give them first would be to stop trying to do everything. Just do much less, better. And really just be intentional with where you put your time and energy, because that's what I'm going to help them work with. Like, where can we really be intentional about your time and your energy, and just really focus on those things that bring us the most return on our investment, not those that just keep us busy to be busy.
All right. So that's super interesting, because I know a lot of top performers in our company that feel like their value is tied to being able to say that they do everything and that they're always available, and that they, and I hear this all the time. Well, I'm a type A personality. I'm a control freak. I can't let go of those things, because what happens if I delegate it and then it's not done exactly my way? What would you say to them? What would you say to those people that could benefit from a coaching relationship, but really see their identity and their value to the client of doing everything?
Those are high achievers.
Yes.
That's what we have in real estate, are high achievers.
Yes.
And high achievers need to be busy. They need to have many poles in the water. We see this often. But what we also see in high achievers is because they have so many things happening and so many pools in the water, they don't really have focus on all of them. And usually there's one pool that they don't really feel like is really, that's kind of boring. And I don't know if it's paying off fast enough. And so I'm going to yank that one in right before it's about to take off. So even high performers that have a lot on their plate, and they do, still could benefit from some help of just really making sure that we're not to abandon a good idea right before it's going to take off.
So that's an interesting concept too. And I didn't, I know we're wrapping up, but I never really thought about, like, coaching is fluid. It doesn't necessarily have to be a year upon year relationship. It could be a tune-up. It could be 3 or 4 months of getting somebody back on track, as opposed to you working with somebody that is a top performer, where you're helping them grow 10, 20, 30% a year. So it is, once again, it isn't a one-size-fits-all relationship.
It's not. I mean, you don't have to be like me and start coaching in 2019, and in 2026 you're still doing it.
But obviously you see value in it. So why? Because you're investing in it instead of thinking of it as an expense or a detriment. It is a benefit, and it's become part of your identity and success.
It's an investment.
Yeah. Great. Thank you very much today.
I'm so excited.
This wasn't too painful, right?
No, I mean, I've never been on a podcast, so I said I get to add this to my resume.
Well, I know we started a little late, but Drew, our producer, came through, and our production studio was a mess. So thank you, Drew. And for whoever stole Drew's mouse, please don't mess with the studio next time, so we can start on time. Well, I really appreciate you, Tricia. You and I have worked so closely together over the years, and I'm so proud of your growth and success. And thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, everybody.